Welcome everyone. Welcome to Kitchen Table Creativity. I'm Donna Leffler, and today I have this super fun, whimsical sailboat that we're going to paint together. And here in the US, at the time I'm recording this, we are into July, full on into summer. And so I thought, in my mind right now, I'm thinking of beach, I'm thinking of lakes here in Idaho, river, and also the ocean. And so I thought it was appropriate to paint a sailboat. So let me quickly show you the supplies that I'm going to be using. First, the paint. I have this Heart and Home palette. And so I've created 5 colors from this that I'm going to be using throughout the summer, and they are represented in this sailboat. So I'm going to shift to this coral type red. It's a little bit more orangey. I love this color. It's like a salmon coral red. So I'm going to use that for the sailboat, for the sail. And then I have this yellow, which is, I'll probably warm it up a little bit with the coral for the sun. And then I have the sap green, which is just a little, you might not be able to see it really well, but it's a little green stripe on the boat. And then I have the violet for the little tiny heart and this beautiful turquoise blue color. So these are all really fun, summery type colors. So for the rest of the summer, I'm going to focus on this color palette. So the next few tutorials, you will see these colors. All right, so those are my paints, and they are all Daniel Smith, but by all means use whatever you have on hand. I'm going to do a little bit of mixing today, but you can also, if you don't have these exact colors, you can try mixing them to get similar, or just go with different colors, and that would be totally fine too, and even more fun, I think. Okay, I have some scrap paper, which is the similar paper that I have that I'm going to be painting on, and that's just to test some of my colors. Especially when you're mixing, you might want to see what they look like before you put them on your actual painting. I have some paper towels for blotting. The sailboat, I have a traceable that you can print out. I'm going to be tracing it using this graphite paper. Put the black side down, and you can reuse it over and over. It's just easier to trace, especially when you're first starting, because you can easily center it on your page. You don't have to worry about having drawing skills. Okay, so to do that, I use a stylus, but you can use a pen, you can use a pencil to trace the outline. Then I have 2 very small brushes, a 0 and a 1, that I'm going to use because this is a small image. I have a ceramic palette for mixing. I have a spray bottle of just pure water to wet the paints ahead of time. That way it gets them ready for painting. I have a couple jars of water over here on the right. And for the finishing touches, I've got my Micron pens, a 005 and a 05. And then I might use this Sharpie for the clouds especially. I'm not totally sure. This is a paint pen, which is white. So I always say maybe I'm going to use it because I kind of have to see how it goes and how it looks. And then sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. If you don't have, I don't really use a lot of white paint. I do have a white gouache paint here in my palette, but I really don't use it very often. I tend to gravitate more towards using the pen because it's a little bit easier. But if you don't paint your paper, even though it looks a little bit yellowish, it still looks very white, those areas, if you just don't paint them. Okay, so I think that is it for all my supplies. So I'm going to trace my image and I will be right back. Okay, so here you see I have my image traced. And don't worry about everything being perfectly straight. Drawing lines is hard whether you're freehanding it or whether you're tracing. It's kind of hard to get them perfectly straight, and they really shouldn't be because this is more of a folk art type image. It's very beginner friendly. And so if the lines are a little bit crooked, the stripes are a little bit crooked, that's totally fine. And that even adds to the charm, I think, of the painting. So I forgot to mention, I'm still using my journal book, spiral bound. I have a number of different paintings in this journal now. I've never really painted in a journal before. And I'm really enjoying it because I can see my progress. I can look back at some paintings I've done months ago and just really enjoy them that way. So I put links to all of the supplies and everything that I'm using in the description on this video if you're interested in that. But like always, I say use what you have on hand, use whatever paper you have. It does not have to be the exact things that I'm using. All right, so to start, I'm going to start with the sun, and I'm going to take this yellow, and it's always good to start with the lighter colors, the lightest colors anyway, but I'm going to take this yellow and I'm going to try to warm it up a little bit with a little touch of the coral because I wanted the sun to look a little bit more, not really orange, but a little less bright than this. So I'm going to take just a little bit of this and put it on here. And as always, it's good to rinse your brush and just add a very small amount of the darker color to the lighter color. And so I'm going to test this. And I like that. See how this is just a little tiny bit more orangey. A little bit, tiny bit warmer. And it's good to start with the lighter colors when you're painting with watercolors because for one thing, as you're rinsing your brush, when you use darker colors, the water gets dirty really quickly and it can kind of transfer over, and so you might have to get new water. But also because you can always paint darker over lighter, but you can't really paint lighter over dark as easily with watercolor. So I'm using the little bit bigger brush, but if you have a small round tip brush, these are both round tip brushes, you can get really fine detail by holding your brush a little bit more upright. And I like to do these small paintings because I can finish them in a very short period of time for one reason. And I don't know, they're easier to display, they're easier to make into a card. Okay, so that is all the yellow that we have in this picture. So now I'm going to move on, I think, to the blue. So there is quite a bit of blue in this image. We have the water, we have a little bit of blue around the clouds. So what I'm going to do is make this very watery to start out with. I love this turquoise blue, especially for the summer. It just reminds me of beach and water, all fun stuff. So again, I'm going to test it on here. And yes, I want it quite thin and watery. And I'm using the little bit bigger brush for this. And you might even want to switch to a brush that's bigger than what I'm using here, because this is a little bit bigger area. It depends on how it feels to you. I like to really stay with small brushes. For me, excuse me, I get better control. I just feel like my my paintings are easier when I have a little bit more control over the water and the brush. And the bigger the brush on these smaller paintings, I think it can be a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to just kind of leave this a little bit uneven. I'm not going to try to fill this in solid. I like when I have water for it to look like water, like there's a little bit of white. And then for the clouds, I'm going to put a very watered down And I'm actually going to switch to my other smaller brush for this, because I just want to make a very slight bluish edge on these clouds. Leave them mostly white. And as always, I'm going to be outlining my work with the black fine tip pens. So these are going to end up looking a little bit different than what they look like now once we do that. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to get some more concentrated blue here. And I'm going to add this darker to the water now. And I'm just adding paint and then just plain water to kind of move the paint around a little bit. And I'm going to take a tiny bit of this and just add a very ever so small amount, a little bit more onto these clouds, just a little bit like on the edges. Again, getting some plain water, blotting my brush, and just blending this a little bit. Okay, and now we will move on to the hull of the boat. So the hull of this boat is sort of a brownish, orangish color. So you can get brown by mixing pretty much any colors together. If you put enough colors together, it's going to turn muddy, it's going to turn brownish. So what I did here is I took some of the violet color, the purple, and I took a little bit of that coral red and then the yellow that I had on the palette already. And I really like the way that this came out because it looks sort of orangey but sort of brown also. So I'm going to start with that and see how it looks. And I'm going to leave the very top stripe on this boat. I'm going to leave it white for now because I'm going to be painting that green. Another reason why I like to paint smaller projects is because you need such a small amount of paint, and especially when you're mixing, if you need large quantities to say like cover a background, you have to really make sure that you mix enough, because sometimes it's hard to get the same color. So it just makes it so much easier when you need just a small amount. All right, so again, you know, for this to be a little bit uneven, you know, a little bit darker here, a little bit lighter there is really good because it's going to add interest. It's going to look a little bit like wood, maybe a wooden boat. So now I also added just a touch of this blue, and I now have a different shade of brown. So since this is pretty much dried, I'm going to just add a little bit of this again, just to kind of add a little bit of interest. And I think it's good to not fill it in all the way, you know, just have some of the lighter showing through. So I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse my brush really well, and I'm going to, I think, go back to the smaller brush. Rinse that one too. And I'm just going to take this coral red straight out of the palette, or the pan, I mean. And I want this to be pretty vivid. So another thing that, you know, this is something that when you're just starting out, you might not even realize that this happens. It happens to me still quite a bit. I put my brush in the water all the way, which is really too far. I mean, it's better to just kind of dip your brush, the brush, not the entire metal part too, because then water can end up on the metal part, and you can just keep your paper towel handy if that happens and blot it, because otherwise water tends to drop onto your painting somewhere where maybe you don't want it. And I have that happen. Not a lot, but it does happen. So just to be aware of it. And again, you don't have to worry about this being perfect. I'm just going to do every one of these stripes with this beautiful coral. This is one of my favorite colors. So we just had the 4th of July last week here, and oh my gosh, it was the biggest celebration. And my son and his wife are here. We had our grandkids, my daughter and her husband, and her mother and father-in-law. We just had the best time. They had the most amazing firework display here in Star, Idaho, where we live. So we had a lot of eating, a lot of fun, and I'm a little bit hoarse, I think. But another thing that's happened here is there's a fire going on in the hills, which is very sad. But happens, especially here in the West and in this state where it gets so dry, the humidity is so low, and things do burn easily. So I don't know how this fire started. It's in the hills still. And I think they're working on trying to get it out. And so we have a little bit of smoke in the air, and I think that's also affecting my respiratory a bit. So I guess pardon my hoarseness today. And we've just been doing so much fun stuff with the kids. We went horseback riding. We're going to go to the lake later today. And my daughter-in-law is using my studio because she's working remote today. And so I moved downstairs, and I'm painting now on a folding table in front of the window. And this is just to say, that's why I say kitchen table creativity, because You can really paint these easy little projects almost anywhere. I travel with my paints. I've painted at hotels. I've painted at houses that we've rented and stayed at. I haven't done a lot of painting outdoors. That's something that I do want to try. I'm really not sure how it would go with watercolor because watercolor dries so fast. But I am going to try that at some point too. And as you can see, I'm just kind of going over these stripes. I want them a little bit darker. Grab some more paint. Because I do want them to be somewhat vivid. Now, I paint at least one tutorial a week. And I also publish a creative journal. It's called the Creative Heart Journal. I email it for free every Friday. And I write a blog. I have information in there about the things I paint and why I paint the things I paint. And it's just for fun, but you can sign up. It's totally free if you want to receive it. And the link to sign up for that is in the description, along with all the other information. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry a bit, and now I'm going to move on to the green stripe. And then we just have the heart and the pole here, which I'll use that brown again, and we're almost done. So I think while I still have this brown that's not dried up here on my palette, I'm going to just go ahead and paint this pole that's down the center, the sail. And you want to be kind of careful because if the red that you have on the stripes is not dry, that might bleed a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to take the green. And the reason why, really, I have to say why I have this green stripe, I'm going to use the small brush again, is because I like to use 5 colors. I try to just be consistent with that because I think it just helps people kind of stay focused. And I feel like if I start switching it up to like too many colors or just 1 or 2 colors, actually less colors is, I think, fine. But like I said, I like to, in my Creative Heart Journal, I like to put the 5 colors and just kind of stay with that consistently. All right, and then at the same time here, I'm going to rinse my brush really well, take some of this purple, and I'm just going to do this little heart in purple. That is whimsical and cute. All right, so I think the last thing I'm going to do here is just add a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to have to get some clean yellow. The one that I have here on the palette got mixed with too many other colors. And I'm going to put just a touch of that red in it again and make this a little bit darker orange. And I'm going to add that to the sun. Okay, and that is everything I'm going to do for the paint. Now I'm going to let this dry really well, and then I'm going to take my 05 micron pen, and we're going to do some outlining. So, like I said, I'm going to use the 05. It's a little bit bigger than the other pen that I normally use. And if I were doing this and not recording, I would be probably rotating my page around. So feel free to do that if you're following along. Now, this step also is actually, it's not essential. If you like the way that your painting turned out, the way it looks right now, you can just totally leave it as it is and sign your work and be done. But I like to do this because it kind of makes it just sort of pop. And so what I do is I just sort of start drawing where the pencil lines were with the pen. And this is called watercolor sketching, and I talk about this a lot. It's almost as if you had drawn it and then painted it, drawn it in pen and ink. And you don't want like really heavy black lines, so you just kind of want to have the sketching motion so that the lines are a little bit broken and not super heavy. I really like these micron pens. I've tried different black pens, and these seem to work the best for me. So this just kind of fills in maybe where you might have missed a spot, or maybe went out of the lines a little bit. And so it just really makes it so much easier when you're a beginner, especially, to have something that looks really nice and finished. And these clouds, I'm gonna try to keep this light. So I was really inspired to paint the sailboat today because last year we were in Newport Beach, and we're going to be going again this year with our family. And they had watercolor painting at the timeshare that we stayed, the Marriott. And I was so excited because I was just really kind of beginning. And they had a little lesson. And I painted a sailboat, actually quite similar to this one. And so I thought that you would enjoy this because I really enjoyed it when I did it last year. It's a really fun project. And so I talk about it in my journal. I wrote the blog about it this week, and that my kids all joined in. My husband was there. We all painted together. And I discovered that the two women that my sons have chosen, I have twin sons, they're 28, and one is married and the other is dating this girl, but these women are so amazing. They're both super creative and talented. And I was just so impressed because the work that they did was just amazing. So exciting for me to have them in the family, part of the family. And I think that's really what art is. A lot of what art is sharing with other people, at least for me. It can also be a time that you spend alone, just really enjoying the time that you have. All right, so you can see how this has kind of just come to life a little bit more. Oh, I'm gonna do these lines on the boat. Okay, then what I do is I take my other smaller pen, the 005, and I like to sign, but I think for this one I'm going to go a little bit more over some of these. I think my 05 might actually be running out of ink a little bit. And I don't think that I'm gonna add the white. I don't think I need to add the white Sharpie pen. I like the way it's turned out the way it is with the clouds. I don't think they need anything, or the stripes. But if you're following along and you think yours do, you could add some white. It's pretty easy to do. And then I'm just gonna sign my work here in the lower right is where I like to put my initials and the date, just the year, so I can keep track of my progress. All right, so this was a super easy, simple project. Sometimes what I like to do too is take an eraser and go back, and like I see a little bit of lines here from the pencil. Maybe you want to erase them. Again, not really totally that important. Sometimes I feel like I need to erase them, sometimes I don't. Just depends on the project. Okay. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel. I have, I have free classes coming up. I think it's next week already. Just look in the description. You can sign up for this. I do a lot of free stuff. If you enjoyed this project, this is the kind of thing that I love to teach. It's just very simple art. Something that you can say, oh my gosh, you know, I did this, and you could give this as a card. You could just admire your work. You could frame it. You could put it on your counter. You could put it in a refrigerator, whatever you want to do with it. But the most important thing is just to enjoy the process of art and creation, and especially with watercolor, it is just so fun. All right, have a great rest of your day, your evening, and I will see you in the next tutorial.